We have just heard in the first reading one of the best known passages of the whole of the New Testament, the hymn to love. It does matter. We can't be holy or serve the Lord without it. If we are or think we are, we're living a huge illusion. Notice how penetrating it is. Jealousy, the green-eyed monster, ambition, being pretentious, puffed up, and then the good things, being patient, not being irritable. I'd like to zoom into charity on two levels, coupled with what we have in the Gospel. As you may know, this Gospel has given rise to half of the prayer of the centuries in the East. As rosary, they have Chotki. This is made actually by a hermit. And the obligation in the Eastern monasteries is to have a large number of these Jesus prayers said every day. It might also be accompanied by the proskynesis, prostration, quite severe actually as an exercise, many times repeated. And the prayer is composed, as I say, first of all of Lord Jesus, and they've added not Son of David, but Son of God. Jesus Christe, it's the actual Son of God, giving rise therefore to one pole. The Godhead is at that end of the prayer. It might be linked actually with breathing. And the other half then comes into the prayer which has come from the parable of the publican and the Pharisee in the temple. He's not worthy to look up to heaven, the poor publican, but he asks just for mercy for a sinner. And that has come in to the second part of the Jesus prayer. Now, when in the East, in the monastic life specifically, they have this discipline, what they call prayer of the heart. It's not just one thing, it's actually the taking over of time. In an Eastern monastery where it's been handed on properly, tradition is this. As in our severe monasteries actually in the West, the vocal cords are consecrated and are not used except for God, and therefore purely for praise. So wastage and leakage are excluded in the day. And the interiority, and therefore the intimacy of the soul with its God, for whom it has left everything, is protected hugely by not only not opening this lethal weapon, but also by making sure that it can't be opened. How? In the West, traditionally, it was still our discipline actually, where I was formed, it was maintained by the chapter of thoughts. And if one spoke without permission, in the weekly chapter one had to say so, and say also on that occasion, and it was the one thought, where I was formed at least, which had automatically a public penance. It was very humiliating, therefore. In the East, it's maintained like this. When they are working, whether it be a holy work like iconography, or an ordinary sustaining work like gardening, picking fruit, Look carefully and you will see that the lips are not still. They're always in movement, slightly. And what are they doing? They're repeating incessantly, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And so there is no compartmentalization of life. It's all a continuity of the choir. One is no less in prayer in the fields than one is head on in the sacred atmosphere of the hours-long liturgy. And so a process takes place which they refer to as hesychasm. The soul becomes stilled. There is nothing earthly. It is carried along. Its thoughts are naturally orientated, and a huge amount of waste of unnecessary energy takes place. Put in the day only a small spot of recreation, and you've got a leaking kettle. And if you go then to confession once a week afterwards, you'll find that all you've got to say in the confession is coming from that small spot, the leaking bit. Because that's where sin comes in. Close it, and very few things can go wrong. Only internal thoughts. This, then, gives the soul, by extension, an attitude towards the brethren. If one is always in that mode of, have mercy on me, a sinner, one will not come up to the brethren and say, look here, I'm in charge, my ideas are correct. If you don't believe me, look out. It has a changing, transforming, divinizing effect on the soul. It sees its nothingness, and by extension, it has no rights. And it listens well, which is where also I want to land with regard to one specific realm of charity. A contemplative soul normally is a good listener. A soul that leaks a lot is a pathetic listener. It blocks out everything. One of the greatest illnesses in the spiritual life, and indeed in life in general in our age, is noise. We have become noisy souls. Now, in the specifically monastic life, well lived, there is no noise. So every single word has a power to resonate in the depths. Come into the world, you can't get hardly any stillness. You're obliged to listen all the time. And to show that we don't see the problem, we add to it all these emitters of noise. Even if they're not talking, they've got words. That's what's come into our soul. Do you think that we're heading for contemplation when all day we hear nothing but words without a break? But I want to go into one thing. It's the pain that we cause and the lack, therefore, of charity that we exercise in one specific area. Very, very few on earth really listen. And many, many, many on earth, even pious souls, don't hear their own pain. We don't feel what we're causing. We don't know when we're becoming heavy. We don't know when people are actually switching off and only want one thing, that we keep quiet. Actually, when I was starting off, I was given very solid advice by Bishop Smith. I was with him in the early stages one day in his house, and he gave me 3 concrete bits of advice. 1, in preaching, don't be too long. He went on, if you get the reputation of being too long, people will switch off before you start. And I've seen that. It's called in homiletics landing difficulties, or not stopping when you should by going beyond the finishing post. And the problem is this, quite often, many have prepared their sermon word for word and have to read it and can't abbreviate it. There's no feedback because they're not looking into the eyes. A preacher knows if he's looking at his people whether they're engaging or not. He can pick it up straight away. And there are ways and means of making sure they do. But it happens also in our conversation. Be careful, it could be your case. There's a whole art in exchange of soul, and it's made of something of this: the humility to abdicate before a presence, and to learn perhaps that that presence might have a truth, a morsel of a truth that I haven't yet acquired. Learn the trick. It's worth it. You're only here once. He gave me 2 other bits. Don't get involved with people who come at you with messages. He meant be careful, because people with gifts will come at you as a hermit and gravitate towards you. Be prudent. He knew the problem. And one last one, which concerns us here actually. Don't get too involved with one specific area. He was referring to the Latin Mass because he knew that if you did, they'd own you and be all over Ireland celebrating. He allowed this one quietly each week, and he was glad it was happening, but keep it there. You have to be what you are. Don't be owned by any group. I leave it, my friends, with this. With regard to noise, it's also damaged our church and our praise. I end where I started. That otherness of being nothing at all before the presence is what we carry with us from the altar to our day. And whereas in the East, the ordinary Fred Bloggs can have a mystical experience on a Sunday for 3 hours, we can't in our damaged liturgy in Ireland, except perhaps in a place like this. Why? It's not orientated upwards, but outwards. Man is thought about, and there's only an unstoppable flow of words. We must learn humility on the vertical and the horizontal, remembering how in the East they have this principle, which I quote from the ancient liturgy of St. James, which is said to go back to the Apostle in Jerusalem. Let all mortal flesh keep silence and stand with fear and trembling, and meditate nothing earthly within itself. For the King of kings and Lord of lords, Christ our God, comes forward to be sacrificed and to be given for food to the faithful. And the bands of angels go before him with every power and dominion. The many-eyed cherubim and the 6-winged seraphim covering their faces and crying aloud the hymn. On goes repeating as they do in the East, Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. That is praise. We have no right to clap each other in church, and if we do, it's a form of sacrilege. Why? We're appropriating the glory